up, everybody? You guys doing good? Yeah, my name is Matt. Glad to have you guys here for high school. Hey, Aaron. What's up? Okay, so thanks, man. The reason why that's funny is we have J-High right before this, and Aaron came by and just kind of like tapped me on the shoulders when I started the message for J-High. And so I turned and did this, and all the J-High kids watched me get stood up. Like, he just kept walking because he was already walking, and I'm like, yeah, you guys all saw that, right? So he had to come back anyway. That's funny. Hey, guys. We are wrapping up this series called Boss. Have you guys enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed it? Yeah, okay, all right. You don't have to lie. If you hated the series, just don't make any boo. I heard a boo there. Hey, so this is last week. For the last few weeks, we've been talking about what it's like to have a boss. I want to talk today about what it's like to be the boss. And so this is going to be you and me. We're going to have opportunities to lead, to be the one that's in charge. I think it's worth talking about. Here's my question. Have you ever done anything that reminded you, like it was just like, oh man, I'm turning into my parent? Anybody have that moment? This is really weird. For me, it's how I sneeze. And you're like, okay, like that's super specific. It's not, it's because the Dentons just have a really weird sneeze. Like it's a very weird, like it will stop. If I sneeze in front of a stranger, they will stop and go, are you sneezing or are you dying? I just need to know. Are you okay? And so that's something, that's not like a nature versus nurture thing. Like I don't think I chose the sneeze. I think the sneeze chose me. But I grew up with brothers and no sisters. And so like, there's some things that I thought like were going to be my parenting style that just aren't my parenting style now that, you know, God gave me daughters. And so one thing that I planned on doing that I don't think I'm going to do anymore is my dad would drive home his points whenever we were in trouble by like poking us in the chest. Like that was his way of like, not hard, just like a tap right there on the collarbone, just letting us know. So it'd be like if I came home late and broke curfew, son, we've been worried sick about you, poke. You were supposed to be home by 11, poke. Do you know how worried we were? Poke. I'm like, you already made that point. Go apologize to your mom, poke. It was like a telegram, like, you know, you're in trouble and you're grounded, stop. You know, like, and so every point, he was a point poker. That was his parenting style, and it's something I really wanted to emulate. And I think we do this. I think we look at our leaders, we look at our parents, we look at our teachers, and we go, I really like that, I want to do that, but I really don't like that, I'm not going to ever do that. And so we had this running list in our heads of what's going to be different when we're in charge. But here's the truth. Until we're actually leading, we have like really good theories. Like it's really good like ideas. It's not actually practice. It's not actually like something that we've like field tested. It's just more like, I don't like that, and so I'm going to do things differently. And so it's all in theory. It's not actually in practice. Until we actually lead, we don't face the reality of being the boss. But here's my question. Have you ever discovered how tough leadership is? You had your opinions, you had the way that you thought things were going to go down, and then you become like the leader for the group assignment. And now it's you trying to get like your friends convinced to write their part of the paper, to do so. Hey, please just do some work. Like, please just show up and do something. And so now like your good theories are going out the window. You know, you get to lead the rehearsal, the teacher's gone, like you lead the rehearsal, and all of your good theories on good leadership, it's descending into chaos. You're like, I need my teacher back. Like, where did she go? Why did you leave me here? Here's the truth. Any captain of the team, any president of the student government, any hall monitor, any grade school lunch line leader will tell you the same thing. Leadership is tougher than it looks. Could you imagine that grade school kid just going, man, heavy is the crown. You know, heavy is the head who wears the crown. Here's the truth. Here's what we see when it comes to being the boss. It's actually always going to be true. It's easier to critique than it is to actually lead. It's so much easier from our armchairs to just go, man, that's wrong. They shouldn't have done that. In fact, this whole idea is like how ESPN started like a whole network. Like that is ESPN to a P, to a T. Don't critique me. It's easier to say, oh, he's really bad at public speaking than actually get up here. See, it's part of my point. I didn't plan that. Think about this. You have a coach, fourth quarter, fourth down, 1 yard to go. Split-second decision, what do? I'm going to go for it. If he does, the ESPN analysts move on, you know, like he wins the game. If it doesn't pay off and they lose the game, they will spend a week calling for this man's head. Like they would go, he is the worst coach ever. He should return his paychecks. He really, should be deployed out of America. Like he should be treated like a tax collector in center. Like they will spend a whole week analyzing a split-second decision that a coach made. I love this because obviously George Lucas got a lot of flack for the prequels that were coming out when I was in high school. And so they're like interviewing him one day. They're like, what do you think about all this bad press? Like all the people that are upset, all the fans that hate the new movies. What do you think? Like, do you think you made a mistake with Jar Jar Binks, George Lucas? And his quote back to this interviewer was this: critics aren't creators, they're destroyers. I'd rather associate with creators than destroyers. Boom. Mic drop, George Lucas. They're still bad, but that's a great quote. Sorry. I remember this quote. This just stuck with me. My youth pastor would always say on this topic, he goes, the higher you climb the ladder in leadership, the more people can see your butt, which to this day is why I'm self-conscious anytime I'm on a ladder. Like I can't get it out of the back of my head. Like we were tearing down after Galentine's, and so we were taking like stickers off, and I was on a ladder, and I was like, everybody else go home. It's fine. I'm good. I just don't want people looking at my butt. Anyway, how do we get there? Here's the truth about leadership. It actually has less to do with being called a boss. It has less to do with a position. It has less to do with like being given a title. In fact, here's what leadership actually is. Leadership is influence. That's what leadership is. It's influence. When are you being a leader? Anytime you're influencing others. Anytime what you're doing is impacting or affecting the lives of other people. So you and your buddies, you go to 7-Eleven. You do this? Is this a thing? You go to 7-Eleven? You make a Slurpee and you go, you know what sounds really good? A half cherry and half Coke Slurpee, which by the way is like godly. It's awesome. And so you make that half cherry, half Coke Slurpee. Your friend looks at like his Slim Jim and he looks at his Sprite and he goes, this is not good. What does he do? He puts that stuff away. And what does he do? He goes and makes a half cherry, half Coke Slurpee. You just became a leader, my friend. You are the Slurpee influencer. Forget being a social media influencer. I want to be a Slurpee influencer. That's really how I can make an impact on this world. But anytime you're influencing someone, you're being a leader. That's what leadership is. Leadership is influence. So here's my point. In some ways already, even though you're still under mom and dad's roof, even though you still have multiple teachers, principals, vice principals, group leaders, all these people that are leaders in leadership over you, that have positions over you, in a lot of ways, you still get to be a leader. You're not waiting for a position for one day. You're not having to wait and go, one day when I'm given a title, one day when I'm promoted, one day when I'm put in this position, I'll be a leader. No, there's already opportunities for you to lead because leadership is influence. And in more and more ways as you grow, you'll get opportunities in life to lead. You get opportunities to influence other people. So here's my question for you. It's not if, but it's when you're a leader. What will be different when you become the boss? Out of the theory, out of the I would do things differently, when you're actually in the practice of being a leader, what's going to be different about your leadership style? What's going to be different about how you boss other people around? What have you observed? What have you looked at? And what are the rules now that as you're looking at leadership of going, what do I want my life's impact to be? How do I want to influence the people around me? How do I want to be a boss that does it differently? So if it's parenting, it can't just be, well, I wouldn't do that. Okay, what would you do if your teenager missed curfew? I don't know, but I wouldn't do that. It's got to be more when you actually become the boss. If it's being the principal, well, my principal is just grumpy. I wouldn't be grumpy. Dude, if you're dealing with what that principal is dealing with, you might be grumpier. You might be he's the exception to the rule. He's doing pretty good. If it's your coach and you're like, my coach runs me too much, I would not run the team this much. Okay, but aren't you in track? It's kind of the whole thing, bro. That's the whole thing. Here's the thing. Jesus actually had a great answer for us about what could be different. He looked at this question, and he actually has a great answer. Here's what he says in Matthew 20. He says, Jesus called them together, and he said, this is his followers, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. He says, but among you, it will be different. He's going, you've seen it. It's so typical in leadership The typical way that people lead is they just make it all about them. They're there to be served. They're there to flaunt that they're in leadership. They're there to lord it over you and go, hey, do it because I say so. And so he's going, you've seen that kind of leadership. He's saying, I think there's a better way to do it. I think there's a different way to be a leader. Here's what he goes on to say. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. Now, I want to pause right here because a lot of times, us in 2020 in America, we see this word, wherever it is, and we immediately put like the I'm in 2020 and in America lens through it. It didn't look like, in Jesus' day and age, what has been rightly called America's biggest shame. It didn't look like American slavery in Jesus' time. What it actually looked like was more like indentured servitude. There was a season, and you went into slavery, and you actually came out of it one day. And so it was like a prolonged, I'm going to give up my freedoms temporarily for a benefit down the road. I'm saying this for two reasons for you. One, I don't want this to keep being an issue that trips up young Christians because the Bible doesn't condone America's biggest shame. That's number one, why I want you to know that. Number two, if you actually understand the biblical definition of what slavery looked like and the illustration that the Bible paints with it, it actually shows you a picture of exactly what Jesus did for us. It's actually different because this is exactly what Jesus did. He suspended his freedom for a benefit later. Here's what he says, what he goes on to say. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. I'm going to leave the right hand of the Father. I'm going to give up, in some ways, my divinity. I'm going to go and serve my creation. I'm going to temporarily suspend my freedom for the benefit of what? So that we could no longer be slaves to this world. So that we could no longer be stuck in our sin. He temporarily suspended his freedom so that others could benefit. That is the picture, the best picture ever of what a leader does. He gives up, or she gives up, her rights or his rights for the benefit of those that they lead. That's the picture that Jesus gives us. Serving others and leading through serving. So if you want to be a great leader, if you want to be different than what you've seen out there, if you don't want to be the typical leader, lead like Jesus. It means that you're going to have to sacrifice. It means that you're going to have to, as a leader, not think about your own self-interest. You're going to have to think about the benefit of those that you lead, and you're going to have to serve. It's this idea that we get in government where we go, okay, are they a politician or are they a public servant? It's the beautiful picture that Christ painted of going, I'm going to lay down my life for those that I lead. Because leadership is influence, and the best way for me to influence is for me to lead like Jesus, which means I'm not going to make you serve me. I'm going to look for ways when I lead you to serve you, to make your life better, to love you, to encourage you, to inspire you, to be different to where you know, hey, I would listen to anything that person says because I know that they lead me. See, positional leadership is the weakest form of leadership. The do as I say because I'm in charge of you is the weakest form of leadership. The strongest form is I know that this leader has been put in charge of me, and I'm so thankful that they are because I know that they love me, they care about me, and they serve me. If you want to be a different kind of leader, lead like Jesus. But you can take it a step further. Not only can you lead like Jesus, as a different kind of leader, you can let Jesus lead. Here's what I mean by this. When they first came into the promised land, they started to, they kind of went through the season there where they were establishing a nation. They had judges for a while. There was a season there. But eventually, with Israel and Judah, God set up kingship. He set up a king to be in charge of his two nations. And so what does he do? He establishes a king for this nation. And really the whole point of Israel this time is to be the example to the world of what it means to follow God. They were God's chosen example, God's chosen nation to be a light to all nations. And so he says, all right, let's establish Saul as king. But what happens is Saul cares more about what people think about him than what God thinks about him. And so he goes, I got to call an audible here. This doesn't look right. They're not getting what all they could get from a king. And so here's the reason why God removed Saul from kings, didn't let his sons continue the kingship, and why he established David as a king. This is Acts 13. Here's what it says. God removed Saul and replaced him with David, a man about whom God said, I have found David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart. Look at this. He will do everything I want him to do. In other words, God said, if I make David king, you know who becomes really the king for Israel? Me. He realized that David would take his position and give his position to God. How cool would it be if you became a leader and it wasn't just like, wow, Lily's my leader, but it's like, no, like I feel like she's letting God lead her. And I feel like I get closer to God through her leadership. It's called giving up my being a boss so that he can be the boss. It's possible for you to get out of the way and let God be the boss. It's possible not only to lead like Jesus through serving, but to let Jesus lead through you. And I think it's the coolest thing that we can do when we get an opportunity to lead, where they don't just get Matt, they get Jesus. They don't just get my opinions or what I think is right. They know that I'm thinking about them. I'm praying for them. I want to serve them. I'm looking for ways for me to get out of the way and let God have my position. Let God have my platform. Let God have my influence, because I'm recognizing at the end of the day, dude, it wasn't my talents that got me there. It wasn't my work ethic that got me there. We've already talked about this in the weeks leading up to this. God establishes authority, so God put me there for a reason. He established me. I want to get out of the way and let God do what he wants to do. So it's not just leading like Jesus, it's letting Jesus lead. So here's my challenge. And you got to learn this now. Even when you are the boss, keep God as your boss. One day, it's probably already happening some ways, because this is the season and time in high school where you're learning and you're getting ready to be launched. And so freedom is happening more and more for you, where you're not being told to get dressed. You're not being told what to wear. You're not being told when to go to sleep. A lot of this stuff is already being released because your parents are setting you up for life on your own. And so this freedom thing is going to happen more and more. And in more ways, you're going to have less bosses. In more ways, you're not going to have anybody telling you what to do. I just celebrated my 9th anniversary with my wife. I didn't know whether to pause there and wait for the clap. So I kind of did the half thing, and I was like, I'll pause for a second, and then I'll just keep going. Thank you. I'm not going to pretend like it's not in my notes to pause for applause, but it is. And here's the thing. In 9 years of marriage, she has never woke me up at 5:30 with a whistle saying, get up, Denton, it's time to go work out. It doesn't feel like how it was in high school when I had a coach making me work out or making me practice or making me run. She has never once yelled at me while I was bench pressing. It's just it's not something that's part of our marriage. Maybe it's part of you guys' marriage, you group leaders, but it's not part of my marriage. If I sat on the couch and just ate Cheez-Its, which I eat off-brand Cheez-Its, Cheez Bits, but that's not important. I think my wife might say something in love, but I don't think she's ever going to force me like a coach would. As freedom is set up, as freedom is given to you, as you have less and less bosses, it's a choice to keep God as your boss. And what's hopefully happening is as you serve and you submit to people authority, what you're hopefully setting up is you're going, I don't want to be on my own. I don't want to have no accountability in my life. I don't want to have all freedom and no responsibility. I think I need God as my boss. And so if I can learn to serve my mom, if I can learn to obey my mom, one day, hopefully, when my mom is not telling me those things anymore, I still want God to be telling me things. I still want to choose his leadership even when he's not forcing me to listen to him. Even when he's not putting a person in front of me saying, do this, don't do that. I still have to choose one day when I have no bosses left that I still have one boss. That's what you have to do. So here's what I want to set you up with. Here's what I want you to see. To lead like Jesus and let Jesus lead, to keep God as your boss, you got to let go of the ego. You got to learn to not be like the typical leader who flaunts it, who puts their ego in the way, who lords it over people. You got to learn and really understand God's the boss. I'm not the boss. Here's what it looked like in the church in Corinth. And so the church in Corinth is having this argument over who their leader is, because they have Paul who planted the church, and then Paul goes on to do what God's called him to do. He's planting more churches, but occasionally he writes letters, and he's leading through letters. He's leading through other people, and so he's still a leader to the church in Corinth, but they have this guy who's there every week called Apollos, and so the argument there is, who's our leader? Who do we listen to? Who's our guy? Is it Paul or is it Apollos? And I love Paul's perspective on who the actual leader is, because look what he says in 1 Corinthians 3. He says, after all, who is Apollos? Who's Paul? We're only God's servants through whom you believe the good news. Each of us did the work the Lord gave us. I planted the seed in your hearts and Apollos watered it, but it was God who made it grow. It's not important who does the planting. It's not important who does the watering. What's important is that God makes the seeds grow. When you understand that God is your boss, it helps you have the right perspective on who's actually doing the work. See, without God as boss, it's just, hopefully this quarter we have more money and we bring more money in for the business. Hopefully we're able to do a couple cool things. Hopefully we're able to win a few games. But when God's the boss, he takes anything that seems like a temporary or not even that important work as a leader, and he makes it an eternal impact. God doesn't do anything small. And so when God's the leader, when God's the boss, everything we do in leadership matters because he's ultimately in charge. So here's what it looks like for us. Here's what we do to get ourselves, before I get there, here's what it looks like. God is your lifelong boss. Number one, what I lead matters because God's in it. And number two, my role is not as important as his. Do you see how it keeps ego out of the way? You see how it keeps you from lording it over people and telling people just do what I say because I say so? You're going, no, I want God to lead. I want to get out of the way and let him lead. So here's how you do it. How do you keep it from being about you? Number one, don't lobby for it. This is a huge pet peeve, but I really do believe it's a biblical principle. If I have to convince and self-promote, what I'm doing is I'm not practicing the belief that I have that God establishes leadership. I'm saying I have to establish my own leadership. I have to go and get that promotion. I have to go and get that position. It's on me. And so what happens if you lobby for a position and you have to, suck up to your boss or kiss the brass ring or go all out of your way to play the political game and try to lobby for a position? What happens when you get that position? You don't think God gave it to you. You think you got it for you. And so you hold on to it and you're jealous of other leaders and you're always worried about somebody taking your position. When you're open-handed and you don't lobby for it, you go, God put me here, and the day that he wants to take it away, I know he's got more for me. You stay open-handed for it when you don't lobby for a position, and it stops being about you, and you're going, okay, this is the platform he's given me for this time and for this season and for this way that I'm parenting and this way that I'm leading. And when that season's over, I know God's got more for me. So it starts with this faith thing of going, I can let everybody else try to present this perfect picture of themselves, to try to play the game, to try to get caught up in all this. I'm just going to be faithful. I'm not going to lobby for it. I'm just going to keep doing the little things and just being faithful with what God's already given me. And that way, I don't struggle when God gives me that platform because I didn't do it for me. God did it for me. And it's a much healthier way to look at leadership, and it keeps it from being about you. The second thing, Jesus already said it, don't lord it over people. Don't lord it. Don't flaunt it. Don't make it about you. Look for ways to serve. Here's the truth. Leaders are leaders regardless of position. You take a leader, you remove their position, you remove their budget, you drop in the middle of a thunderstorm, turn them around 300 times, they'll still find ways to influence because they are a leader. You don't need a platform. You don't need the next thing. You don't need to be waiting on the next season. You don't need to be waiting and going, when I get in charge, when I become the boss one day, because leaders are leaders. And regardless whether or not they have a lot to work with or a little to work with, they find ways to lead because they're not looking to lord it, they're looking to influence. They're not looking for ways to make it about them, they're looking for ways to serve. And so a leader can do that anywhere. They can influence with or without. So don't lord it over people, make it about what it's really about. So that's the defense. Here's the offense. How to give your leadership position to God. Number one, invite his leadership in. If you got 20 bosses right now, this could still be the most important boss you got. God, I don't want to do life without you. I want you to lead me. I want to be sensitive to what you're doing today. Help me listen to you and obey you today. You're inviting his leadership in. You're inviting his influence in. And the second thing you're doing is this. You ask for his influence out. God, I don't want people to get my frustration or my tiredness today. I just want to look for ways that you can lead in and through me. I want to just look for a way that I could love like you today. I'm just looking for a way for me to get out of the way and for you to do what you want to do in me and through me today. Can you help me influence? Can you help me lead? And the third thing is this: love enough to serve. We all really, this is what we crave, and this is what really, like, if we were to boil down our biggest pick that we have with leaders that we don't like being under, it probably boils down to one of two things. I don't feel like they love me, or I don't feel like I belong on this team. If you have the leadership approach that you love the people that God's put around you, man, imagine what that would do for the people that you're leading. Imagine if they didn't have to ever question whether or not they belonged with you. If they didn't ever have to question whether or not you love them. And so even if you had to correct them, even if you had to do something that was pretty drastic and go, hey, you're way off course, we got to get you back over here. If you're loving them enough to serve them, they understand your heartbeat. They understand the why behind your reason. They understand that you're looking out for them, not looking out for you. Love enough to serve. You get named the team captain for your team. That is not a lording it over position. That's I get to set the bar now of what we're going to be like as a team. I might need to stay late and help with teardown. I might need to stay late and help somebody who's struggling with something. I might need to give a little bit more and give a little extra because I got to love enough to serve. Because when you have no boss, you can keep God as your boss. When you have nobody telling you what to do, you can still invite his leadership in, ask for his influence out, and love enough to serve. Let's pray. God, thank you so much that there is no small impact when a leader leads for you. Help us to boss differently, to lead like Jesus, but to also let Jesus lead. In Jesus' name, amen.